I always thought the worst way to start a morning was realizing you were out of coffee. Turns out, I was wrong. There are worse ways, like standing in your garage at 7:30 a.m., staring at a pair of men's size 12 sneakers that do not belong to you. Now, I'd like to say my first thought was something logical. Maybe a burglar with a foot fetish broke in. Maybe my neighbor, Bob, who's been borrowing my tools for the past 6 years without returning a single one, had finally decided to leave a gift in exchange for my socket wrench. But no, the only reasonable explanation settled in my stomach like a bad diner meal. Someone else had been in my house, and they were comfortable enough to take their shoes off. I nudged the sneakers with my foot, like they might hiss at me and scurry away. Nope. Just regular old running shoes, black with white soles, the kind you buy when you want people to think you go to the gym but actually just wear them to the grocery store. From the kitchen, I heard Mary humming. Cheerful, carefree. The sound of a woman who hadn't expected her husband to take a sudden interest in the garage at this hour. No, I'm not a fool. I wasn't about to go charging into the kitchen, waving some random dude's sneakers around like I'd cracked the case of the century. No, if Mary had brought another man into our house, she was already comfortable lying to me. That meant I had to play it cool. I took a deep breath, stepped over the sneakers, and walked inside. Morning, I said, all casual-like, as if my world hadn't just shifted slightly off its axis. Mary turned around, holding a spatula like she was the poster girl for wholesome American breakfasts. Her blonde hair was pulled back in that effortless way that probably took 15 minutes and 3 types of styling mousse. She wore an oversized t-shirt that, upon closer inspection, was also not mine. It had some college logo on it, one neither of us had ever attended. Morning, she chirped. You're up early. Yeah, I said, keeping my voice steady. Thought I'd check something in the garage. She nodded like that was the most normal thing in the world. Coffee's ready if you want some. Oh, how thoughtful. Nothing washes down the suspicion of infidelity quite like a fresh cup of medium roast. I leaned against the counter, watching her. She flipped a pancake, eyes a little too focused on the pan. There was something about her posture, about the way she kept her movements light, almost rehearsed. I had known Mary for 10 years. I knew her. I have a secret stance. And I knew it well, because I had seen it before. 7 years ago, she threw me a surprise birthday party. And she was terrible at hiding it. She got all twitchy, asked too many questions about my schedule, and suddenly started caring way too much about whether I preferred vanilla or chocolate cake. The difference between then and now? That secret had been a fun one. This had a little more weight to it. I sipped my coffee, glancing toward the back door. Hey, did you have company over? She stiffened, just for a fraction of a second. Most people wouldn't have noticed. But I did. Because when you've been married long enough, you become an expert at the micro-reactions. The half-second pauses. The overly casual shrugs. The way someone suddenly gets very interested in whatever they're doing. Mary played it cool. What? Oh. No, just me. I nodded, taking another sip. Funny, I found a pair of shoes in the garage. Big ones. Definitely not mine. There it was again. That half-second pause. Then the overcorrection, laughter that came a little too quickly, a little too forced. Oh, those. Yeah, must be Mark's. He came by last night to pick up that drill you lent him. Mark, I repeated. Mark, who wears a size 12? She frowned. How would I know his shoe size? Yeah, how would you? I mused. Mary turned back to the stove, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. The way she shifted her weight, trying to act normal. If there was one thing I knew about Mary, it was that she was a terrible liar. Now, a smarter man might have let it go. Might have waited, gathered more evidence, made absolutely sure before poking the bear. But I've never been accused of being the patient type. Interesting, I said, swirling my coffee. Because I just texted Mark. Her hand jerked slightly, nearly knocking the spatula off the counter. What? Yeah. Asked him if he left his shoes here. I set my cup down, tilting my head. Weird thing, though. Mark says he hasn't been over in weeks. Silence. Thick enough to cut with a butter knife. Mary turned around slowly, her face carefully blank. James, I don't know why Mark would say that. He was definitely here. Uh-huh. I nodded, giving her my best, do I look that stupid? Stare. And let me guess, he also happened to leave behind a t-shirt from a college he never went to? She blinked. What are you talking about? I pointed at her oversized shirt. That. Not mine. Not Mark's. Not yours. So, I'm just wondering, whose is it? She opened her mouth. Closed it. Her jaw tensed in that way people's do when they're mentally flipping through their list of available excuses and realizing they've hit a dead end. I crossed my arms, waiting. And that was the exact moment, I saw it. The calculation. The gears turning. The what can I say to get out of this expression. It was the same look she gave when she tried to convince me she hadn't left the gas tank on empty when I specifically remembered it being half full the day before. Except this time, it wasn't about gas. And then, she did the most unexpected thing. She laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not an awkward, oh no, I'm caught laugh. No. This was an actual, genuine chuckle, like she had just thought of something incredibly funny. Wow, she said, shaking her head. You're really trying to be Sherlock Holmes over some laundry, huh? I raised an eyebrow. Am I? Yes. She gestured at the shirt. It's my cousin's, okay? You remember Josh? He stayed over last month? He left it here, and I just threw it on this morning. No mystery. No conspiracy. Just a t-shirt. A solid excuse. Almost believable. Except for one tiny, insignificant detail. Mary didn't have a cousin named Josh. And that was when I knew. My wife was a liar. And now, it was just a matter of figuring out what else she'd been lying about. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, looking at the woman I'd shared my life with for nearly a decade. The woman who, 5 minutes ago, was making pancakes like the perfect, doting wife. The same woman who now stood in front of me, trying to convince me that she had a cousin named Josh who, according to my extensive knowledge of her entire family tree, did not exist. So, naturally, I did what any good husband would do. I nodded like I believed her. Josh, I repeated, letting the name hang between us. Mary exhaled sharply, hands on her hips. Yes, Josh. My cousin. My mom's sister's son, Josh. He stayed over when you were on that work trip last month. The one to Denver. You seriously don't remember? Oh, I remember Denver, I said, watching her closely. The work trip I never took. Her lips pressed together. Tight. Like she just realized she tried to bluff with a 2-7 offsuit. Well, maybe it was a different time, she muttered, waving her hand dismissively. It's not a big deal, James. It's just a stupid shirt. I can call my mom if you want. She'll tell you all about Josh. I would have loved to see her attempt that. Really? It would have been the performance of the year. Watching her mother, who had 3 sisters, none of whom had children named Josh, scramble for a non-existent family member would have been worth the price of admission. But I didn't need to take it that far. Because I already knew. The sneakers. The shirt. The sudden amateur hour level of lying. It all pointed in one direction. Mary had a man in my house. She was looking at me now, arms folded, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Are we really doing this? She asked, giving me that exasperated, you're overreacting tone she usually reserved for when I took too long picking out a movie. Are we really about to have an argument over a t-shirt? I stared at her for a long moment. Then I sighed and rubbed my jaw. No, I said finally. We're not. Her eyes flickered with something. Relief? Victory? Who knew? But she took a step back, grabbed her coffee cup, and leaned against the counter. Good, she said, taking a sip. Because honestly, James, I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. Mary froze mid-sentence. Just got an alert from the security cam, I said casually, scrolling. You know, the one over the driveway? The one that records when someone walks up. Her cup lowered an inch. You. Yep. I turned the screen toward her. Funny thing, though. When I left for work yesterday, my car was the only one in the driveway. But then, around 10:30 last night, I tapped the screen, letting the footage play. This guy showed up. A man. Early 40s. Average build. Short dark hair. Wearing a blue button-up and, wouldn't you know it, a pair of sneakers that looked an awful lot like the ones currently sitting in my garage. Mary's entire body went stiff. Now, I'm not saying I should jump to conclusions, I continued, scratching my chin. Maybe this is just another long-lost cousin I've never met. Or a door-to-door salesman who got really comfortable. Or maybe, just maybe, this is the part where you explain why some random guy was coming to our house at 10:30 at night, only to leave at 6 in the morning, barefoot. Her mouth opened, then shut. This was it. The moment of truth. Would she double down? Would she go for the classic, that's just a friend? James, you're being paranoid? Would she suddenly remember another family member who just happened to stop by for an impromptu all-nighter? Mary took a deep breath. James. I raised an eyebrow. Mary. Her fingers curled around her cup. Tight. Then, just like that, she let out a short laugh. Wow, she said, shaking her head. I mean, Seriously? You're really checking security footage on me now? This is what we're doing? Sneaking around with cameras like I'm some kind of criminal. Mary, a strange man was in our house last night. And instead of explaining, you're making me the bad guy. Because it's crazy, she shot back, throwing up her hands. Do you even hear yourself? You're acting like some paranoid lunatic, digging through cameras, stalking me like I'm on trial. I took a slow, deep breath. So, no explanation then. She scoffed. I just told you, James. There is no explanation. Because nothing happened. I nodded. Right. Nothing happened. Nothing at all. He just came over to, what? Read bedtime stories? Practice yoga? She rolled her eyes. I don't have to explain myself to you. If you don't trust me, then maybe that's the real problem here. There it was. The classic, flip the blame strategy. A bold move. One I'd seen before in arguments about much smaller things, like the time she left the gas bill unpaid and somehow made me feel guilty about asking. But this wasn't a late bill. This was something else. I looked at her, long and hard. Then I set my phone down on the counter, crossing my arms. All right, then, I said evenly. If there's nothing to explain, let's call him. Mary's expression barely flickered, but I saw it. The half-second flicker of panic before she masked it with a smirk. What? Let's call him, I repeated, reaching for my phone again. Since it's just some totally normal visit, no big deal, right? I'll just call and ask him myself. James, you don't even know who he is. I tilted my head. So you do know who he is? She blinked. Then her face tightened. That's not what I owe. I mean, if you have his number, great. Even better. We can clear this whole thing up right now. Maybe he is just a friendly neighborhood visitor. Maybe he did just leave his shoes here by accident after an innocent night of, I don't know, casual board games. I'd love to hear it straight from the source. She was silent. I stared at her. She stared at me. Then she let out another small, sharp laugh. You're ridiculous. Am I? Yes. You are. I shrugged. If I'm ridiculous, then prove it. Tell me his name. Call him. Clear this up. She gritted her teeth. That was the moment. The exact second I knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that she was full of it. Because if there was any way out of this that didn't involve a complete confession, she would have taken it. Instead, she did what all guilty people do when they run out of options. She grabbed her coffee, walked right past me, and said, I'm done with this conversation. And just like that, she left the kitchen. I watched her go, feeling something cold settle in my chest. So, that was it. That was the game she wanted to play. Well, two could play. And I was just getting started. I stood there for a moment, staring at the empty space where Mary had been just seconds ago. It was almost impressive. The speed, the precision. She didn't just leave the conversation, she escaped it, like a criminal who had spent months tunneling out of a maximum security prison and wasn't about to let a guard drag her back inside. I exhaled and walked into the living room. Mary was on the couch, scrolling through her phone like she was trying to find a way to teleport to another dimension. All right, I said, leaning against the doorway. Let's try this again. She sighed, not looking up. James, I'm done talking about this. Cool, I said. Then listen instead. She kept scrolling. I kept standing there. You had a man in this house, I said. I know you did. You know you did. You also know that I know you did. And instead of coming up with a decent lie, you went with my cousin Josh, and let's pretend I don't understand how security cameras work. I mean, honestly, Mary, if you're going to insult my intelligence, at least put some effort into it. She didn't say anything. You can keep ignoring me, I continued, but I'm not going to stop asking. Who is he? We're scrolling. How long has this been going on? Scroll. Is this some new fitness program where men run into people's houses, leave their shoes behind, and vanish before sunrise? Because if so, I gotta say, it's a terrible business model. She finally looked up. James, you're acting ridiculous. Am I? Or am I just a guy who doesn't like strangers showing up in his home at night, wearing sneakers I could probably sell on eBay? She rubbed her temple. I'm not doing this with you. I shrugged. Fine. Then I'll find out on my own. She narrowed her eyes. What does that mean? Oh, you'll see. I walked upstairs, leaving her on the couch. I had no idea what my next move was, but I knew one thing. I wasn't letting this go. My first stop was the closet. Not because I thought the guy was still hiding in there, though. At this point, nothing would have surprised me, but because people get lazy. They leave things behind. They forget small details. I flipped through Mary's clothes. Everything looked normal. Then I checked the laundry basket. And there it was. A neatly folded men's t-shirt at the very bottom. Not mine. Not from Josh. And, conveniently, freshly washed. I grabbed it and walked back downstairs, holding it up like a winning lottery ticket. Hey, Mary, guess what I just found? She didn't even look. I don't care. Oh, I think you do. Because, see, when I do laundry, I don't make a habit of washing strange men's clothes. She let out a slow breath. James. And since it's obviously not mine, I figured, hey, maybe this belongs to the magical man who left his shoes in our garage. You know, the one who apparently prefers to run around half-naked because he somehow lost his shirt and sneakers in the same night. She turned her head slightly, just enough for me to catch the faintest flicker of panic in her eyes. I dropped the shirt onto the coffee table. Want to explain that? Mary stared at it like it was a live grenade. Then, finally, she spoke. I was going to tell you. Uh-huh, I said. Right after you convinced me your imaginary cousin Josh stayed over. Tell me, was that before or after you gaslit me into thinking I was crazy for asking questions? She exhaled. It's not what you think. I laughed. Mary, literally anything would be better than what I'm thinking. She sat up, rubbing her hands together. All right, fine. Yes, someone was here last night. But I held up a finger. Before you say anything else, I just want you to know that if the next words out of your mouth are, he's just a friend, I'm legally allowed to walk out of this house and live in the woods forever. She scowled. I'm trying to explain, James. Then go ahead. By all means. Tell me who this man is, why he was in our house, and why he left behind half his outfit like some kind of terrible magician. She hesitated. Then, in a low voice, she muttered, his name is Adam. Adam. No cousin Josh. No door-to-door salesman. Just Adam. I sat down across from her, nodding slowly. All right. Progress. So tell me, Mary, why was Adam here? She ran a hand through her hair. It's complicated. Not really, I said. I'm pretty sure he was here. Then he left. See? Simple. James. Mary. She exhaled sharply. He's a friend from work. He needed a place to crash for the night, and I said he could stay here. That's all. I raised an eyebrow. Right. Because all coworkers just randomly crash at their married colleagues' houses without their spouses knowing. She crossed her arms. I was going to tell you. You keep saying that, and yet, here we are. She didn't respond. I leaned forward. Let me ask you something, Mary. If this was so innocent, why didn't you just tell me about it? Why did I have to find shoes in the garage? A shirt in the laundry? Why did I have to check the security footage? Silence. Because I already know the answer, I said, standing up. You didn't tell me because you knew I wouldn't believe you. Because you knew it wouldn't sound right. Because you knew that what you were doing was wrong. She swallowed hard. James, No, I cut in. Don't do that. Don't start pretending you care about my feelings now. Her jaw clenched. You know what the worst part is? I said. You could have just told me the truth from the beginning. Maybe it would have hurt, but at least I wouldn't be standing here feeling like a fool who had to dig for answers in his own house. Her fingers tightened against the couch cushion. I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. I need some air. Mary shot up. James? I shook my head. No. Just don't. I walked to the front door and grabbed my keys. I wasn't leaving for good. Not yet. But I needed a second. A minute. Anything to stop myself from saying something I'd regret. As I stepped outside, I could still hear her inside. Still sitting there. Still not giving me the whole truth. And that was fine. Because I wasn't done digging. Not even close. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, staring at my house like it was a crime scene. Because, well, it was. Maybe not the kind with yellow tape and detectives scribbling in notebooks, but the kind where the foundation of everything I'd built was rotting from the inside out. And the lead suspect? Currently sitting in my living room, pretending she had no idea why I was upset. I pulled out my phone and stared at the security app. The footage from last night was there, clear as day. Adam, whoever he was, walking up the driveway, entering my house, staying all night, and leaving early in the morning. All while I was supposed to be none the wiser. But I was wiser. And now, I was done playing games. I scrolled through my apps, opened the one I hadn't used in years, and clicked on the only contact that mattered. Hey, I said when the line picked up. I need a favor. 3 hours later, I had my answer. The thing about people who cheat? They aren't as smart as they think they are. They get sloppy, careless, overconfident. They assume no one's watching. But I was watching. And now, Thanks to my very resourceful friend who owed me a favor from way back, I had more than just suspicion. Adam wasn't just a friend from work. Adam was a sales manager at some software company across town. He was also married. Happily, according to Facebook, which was ironic. Even more ironic? He and Mary had been meeting up regularly for the past 5 months. Hotels, his car, and, last night, our house. I had the receipts. Literally. Bank transactions, hotel records, even a couple of texts my guy managed to dig up. And, the cherry on top? A time-stamped photo of them from a week ago, standing in the lobby of a hotel, looking very not friendly. I sat back in my chair, flipping through the screenshots. There it was. The 100% proof. The undeniable, no way out, slam dunk evidence that Mary had been lying straight to my face. It was weird. I thought I'd feel worse. Thought maybe I'd throw my phone across the room, yell, punch a wall like some guy in a bad breakup movie. But instead, I just smiled. Because now, it was my turn. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to throw a tantrum and beg for answers she'd never give me. I was going to do something better. I was going to make sure Mary understood exactly what it felt like to be blindsided. I walked back into the house like nothing had happened. Mary was still on the couch, looking up with that cautious expression, like she wasn't sure if I was still in detective mode. "You good now?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, sitting down across from her. I was overreacting. Sorry about that. Her shoulders relaxed just slightly. I get it. It was weird. I should have told you about Adam staying over. I just didn't think it was a big deal. I nodded. Yeah, no big deal. She smiled. I smiled back. Then, I pulled out my phone, tapped a few times, and slid it across the coffee table. Her smile faltered. "What's this?" "Go ahead," I said. "Take a look." She hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached for the phone. Her eyes scanned the screen. Then again. Then one more time, just to be sure she was actually seeing what she was seeing. Her face went pale. I leaned back. "So, you were saying?" She swallowed, gripping the phone so tightly I thought she might crack the screen. Where did you get this?" "Oh, Mary," I said, tilting my head. "That's really not the question you should be asking right now." She blinked rapidly, looking like she might pass out. I took my phone back and tucked it into my pocket. "You know what my favorite part is? The hotel. The one you two went to last week. Real classy." "Oh, and the texts?" "Top-notch stuff. Really enjoyed the one where you called me boring and predictable." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. "See, here's the thing," I continued. "I could yell. I could scream. I could throw all your stuff out the window and make a big dramatic scene. But that would mean I actually care. And honestly, I don't think I do anymore. James, I don't," I said, holding up a hand. "Just don't. You had your chance to tell me the truth. You had your chance to come clean. But instead, you lied. Over and over again. And now, here we are." She ran a hand through her hair. I didn't mean to." I laughed. "Oh, come on, Mary. Don't insult me more by pretending this was an accident. You didn't just trip and fall into a months-long affair." She looked away, jaw clenched. "Anyway," I said, standing up, "I'd love to stay and hear whatever excuse you're about to cook up, but I've got things to do." She frowned. "What do you mean?" I stretched. "Oh, just some life changes." Her eyes narrowed. "What kind of life changes?" I pulled a small stack of papers from my pocket and dropped them onto the table. She glanced down. Then, slowly, she picked them up. And just like that, all the blood drained from her face. "You're divorcing me?" she whispered. I shrugged. "I think that's the logical next step, don't you?" She stared at me. "You, James, we can talk about this." "Talk? Oh, now you want to talk? Funny how that works." She flipped through the papers, eyes darting over the legal jargon. This is fast. How did you even know?" I smiled. "Turns out, when you know the right people, things can move really quickly." She looked up at me, panic creeping into her expression. "Wait. Nope," I said, clapping my hands together. "Decision's been made. We're done." Her breath hitched. "James, I turned toward the stairs. "Oh, and don't worry about packing. I already moved your things into the guest room. You can stay there until you figure out what to do next. But I'd suggest you start soon. Because this house? It's mine. And you? Well, you're not." She gripped the divorce papers like they might disappear if she held them tight enough. "You can't just." "I can," I said. And I did. She stared at me, stunned, speechless. For the first time in our marriage, Mary was out of excuses. And I had never felt better. Mary sat there, gripping the divorce papers like they contained the meaning of life, her mouth opening and closing as if she was trying to summon an argument out of thin air. Unfortunately for her, there were no arguments left to make. The evidence was in. The verdict was final. The jury, me, had already walked out of the courtroom. "James, please," she finally said, her voice thin, shaky. "Can we just talk?" "Talk about what?" I asked. "How you managed to sneak a guy into my house while expecting me to believe in an imaginary cousin. Or maybe about how you were planning to keep this up until, what? I accidentally walked in on you two celebrating your 6-month anniversary." She exhaled sharply, running a hand down her face. "I wasn't planning anything." I clapped my hands together. "Oh, well, in that case, let's throw the divorce papers away. It was all just a big misunderstanding. You were just casually seeing a guy behind my back without a plan. Totally makes it better." She winced. "I know I messed up, okay? But you don't have to do this." "Mary," I said, tilting my head. "What exactly do you think this is? Because I've already filed those papers. You've already lost this argument. The only thing left is how fast you want this to go." Her fingers tightened around the papers. "You don't even want to try to work through this?" I laughed. "Oh, you mean like how you worked through things when you were unhappy? By secretly dating Adam?" She inhaled through her nose, nostrils flaring. "I don't," I cut in. "Because unless you're about to admit to literally everything, I don't want to hear it. You had months to come clean. You didn't. So now, I'm just speeding up the process for you." Her lip quivered. "James, we have history, Al." "Yeah," I nodded. "And now, it's history." Her expression twisted, like she couldn't decide whether to beg or scream. But deep down, she must have known it was over. And not just in a maybe we'll fix this one day way. No, this was final. I stood up, stretching. "Anyway, you should probably start figuring things out. I'd say you've got a couple of weeks before this all gets settled. But really, that depends on how much you fight it. If you want to make this difficult, be my guest. Just know it's not going to change the outcome." She looked down at the papers again, her eyes darting across the pages, as if reading them a second time would make them disappear. Finally, she whispered, "What do you want from me?" I leaned down slightly. "I already got what I want. My freedom. Now you just have to decide how you want to leave this story. Dignified? Or desperately clawing at a life you already destroyed?" Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't say anything. I turned and walked away. 2 weeks later, I wasn't surprised that she stalled, that she tried to delay things, that she attempted the "I just need some time to think" routine, like we were discussing what color to paint the bedroom instead of the fact that she had burned our marriage to the ground. What had surprised me, though, was when she finally realized there was no way out and actually signed the papers. No theatrics. No last-minute speeches. Just a sad little signature at the bottom of the page, like a student signing a failed test. And with that, it was done. I made sure she had time to pack her things, gave her a deadline, made sure she stuck to it. The last thing I wanted was to come home and find a half-empty house still clinging to her existence. No, I needed a clean break. No stray shoes in the garage. No extra toothbrush in the bathroom. No signs that she was ever a part of my life. On her last day in the house, I barely spoke to her. Not because I was bitter, but because there was nothing left to say. She stood by the door, her bags at her feet, shifting awkwardly. "So, this is it?" I gave her a polite nod. "Looks that way." She hesitated. I didn't think it would end like this." "That makes one of us," I said. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. "I did love you, James." I smirked. "Loved me so much you let Adam spend the night?" She flinched. I opened the door and stepped aside. "Goodbye, Mary." She lingered for another second. Then, with a slow nod, she picked up her bags and walked out. And just like that, she was gone. I closed the door behind her, locked it, and stood there for a moment, taking in the silence. The true silence, not the kind that comes from someone just being in another room, but the kind that means someone is never coming back. And for the first time in a long time, I felt good. I walked over to the fridge, grabbed a cold drink, and sat on the couch. No arguments. No fake apologies. No tension in the air. Just me, finally free of someone who never deserved me in the first place. And man, did that feel nice. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel